aesthetics, looking at the comic, the erotic, or the strange, and this was sort of the theme to carry us through the project as we were learning these new techniques. The first week with Michael Young, we were required to pick an everyday object. I was assigned this creamer here on the left, and we had to model it exactly as it is. Move into this idea of estrangement and really changing the object. Here's sort of the progression at the top, elongating the spout and exaggerating the function, making it unfamiliar, adding and removing edges to the object. And the whole time thinking of the well-crafted model. Just because you're doing something in the computer doesn't mean it's any quicker or it's any easier or that the craft goes away like it would in a regular physical model. The second week with Rhett Russo, we began to study materiality and thinking about that as another level of estrangement. A material you wouldn't normally see this object in. Here's a good example of, the furry teacup that we were given. Next, we looked at another artist by the name of Bart Hess, who does these really extraordinary photographs with latex in the human body. So what we then had to do was take our new object and put it in a material that you normally wouldn't see this in. And what I ended up selecting was this burlap paper mache. Well, as you'll see in the next object, I'm sitting there at 2 o'clock in the morning with this thing going, oh good God, I cannot present this tomorrow. Turns out, because the mache was so heavy, I took it into class anyway, and Rhett ended up loving it. And for obvious reasons, the class started calling this thing the Ugly Bunny, and it became known as the Ugly Bunny throughout the rest of the project. So it was a testament to don't throw anything away because you can learn something from anything during your process. And what it made me look at was the material and how it started to react, how the mache was rusting the wireframe underneath. The next week we worked with David Rui and we were learning about collage and rendering. We got to go to this really spectacular exhibit at the MoMA. Oh wait, actually, sorry, skipped something. What we ended up doing with the Ugly Bunny was studying it with a 3D scanner. And so taking this physical object now back into the digital world, and you can see you're not given a lot from the scanner. So really learning about cleaning up a physical model, learning about patching and digital sculpture. And so taking what you were given and then making it look like your object. Going on to the third week, we got to go to this really amazing exhibit at the MoMA looking at collage. It was called Cut and Paste. And it had everyone from Mies to Cool House, wonderful work, and beginning to look at computer renderings as basically just another form of collage. One of my favorite quotes from the class was by David, who said that corporate renderings are some of the dumbest images made today. The object of the building with random people kind of walking around it. So what we started looking at was artists who do, a different take on this. This is by the Glue Society. They do Bible images in Google Earth style. So this is the parting of the Red Sea over on this side. Also looking at other artists, he put up these images and you can tell there's something really off about them. What it is actually the artist hangs his subjects upside down and then photographs them. So looking at, these different artists, we then had to put our own object sort of into a strange situation and begin to render it. So this is the Ugly Bunny now standing at this large scale next to the Flatiron Building, really studying light and shadow and making this look convincing, this weird object put in this normal situation, which is really what a lot of architectural rendering is about, and making it look convincing. So each of us in the class did about 20 of these, and mine began to take on this theme of sort of the Ugly Bunnies take over New York. And this was one of the projects. It was inspired by the movie Birds. Here they are crossing the Brooklyn Bridge. And again, just really photoshopping and photo montaging these images into an existing scene. Moving on into the final week, we really worked on final presentation and representation, basically redoing everything from the last 3 weeks again, but making it look like one cohesive project. Again, this idea of these invasive objects taking over the city. I started to look at mold and thinking about that rust that was growing on that first Ugly Bunny model that I had done. And I studied Johanna Martinsson. She's a Swedish set designer who built a bread city and then began to photograph it as it decayed. So what I ended up doing was using the edges that were created in my first digital model as a driver and grasshopper for allowing these mold spores to begin growing on the project. This was one of the final renderings, looking at how these now deformed, sort of estranged objects begin to interact with the city. I really liked the view of the Flatiron because, it's already sort of strange in its own way in perspective. And then seeing how, you have the foreground and the background, studying color, studying texture, adding different elements, again, looking at that collage that we had studied early on. And now, of course, it's at a scale of architecture that we could really relate to a little bit more. The final step was then animating this object, and again, I began looking at the city, and the animation should play next. Do I have to start it myself? Anyway, so what you do is you fly through the city and you actually see these moldy bunnies pop up, and they actually have this mold beginning to grow on them. No? Maybe? The animation was a little bit longer than what you'll see if we get it started, but... Okay, well, anyway, you fly through the city and you see these moldy bunnies, and it looks really awesome, trust me. But anyway, so then the final step, is it still playing? You can go to the next one. So the final step was then, of course, fabricating this weird object, and we had to 3D print a piece of what we've now created, which this was my piece. And so what I really took, away from this class was this idea that working in a digital environment, you're constantly shifting between the 2D to 3D, between animated and still images, vectors, and renderings. And what I took away was a new appreciation for where computer-driven architecture is really going. And I can now use this information to defend myself the next time I hear about how, the computer single-handedly is destroying architecture, and about the lost art of hand drawing. I believe that the computer is nothing but another tool in the history of design. It's something that we shouldn't be afraid of, but should really accept and, profit from. So, thank you.